Hey guys, it's Paul and welcome back to my channel. We are here with a Crimetober video. It's my favorite time of year. And we are going to be talking about Sherri Papini today. Have you guys heard of this extremely frustrating case? Talk about a crazy ending. So let's start with Sherri. She was born Sherri Louise Grafe, and she lived in Redding, California. She was born on June 11th, 1982, and was 34. She was close to her family growing up and lived a pretty normal life. When she was in 7th grade, she met a boy named Keith. They dated for a long time. He was her first kiss, but then they broke up for a little bit. Sherri actually ended up marrying another man named David Dragus in 2016. Things did not go well, and let's just say they didn't stay in the honeymoon phase long. And so Sherri started talking to Keith again fairly quickly. Sherri and David ended up separating, and she moved right into Keith's house. And her and Keith lived in his family home in Mountain Gate, California. And 8 months later, her divorce was finalized. Sherri and Keith were very happy together. It's like they didn't even skip a beat once they got back together. And they just really had this extra time in their past to bond over again. So she ended up marrying Keith in October 2009. And they had a literal fairy tale wedding. They just seemed to be the perfect couple. They ended up having 2 kids together, and Sherri was known to be Super Mom. That was literally her nickname. She was a very good cook and baker. She kept the kids looking really nice, and she just really went above and beyond for her kids. She was active in their sports. She was the homeroom mom. She did all these extra things for her kids. And one thing about Sherri and Keith is they didn't have social media. They were pretty private people. To them, just having their private family was enough. Now, Keith did work at Best Buy, and Sherri was a stay-at-home mom with the kids, which we can all gather she took very seriously. So when Sherri was younger, one of her hobbies was running, so she decided to pick this back up. Sherri decided that she wanted to do a race for Thanksgiving, and therefore started practicing pretty early into the fall of 2016. And she practiced in their neighborhood because it was a pretty nice suburban neighborhood. It was large, so she could get a mile in just in their neighborhood usually. And they also had a private trail she also liked to go on. So we need to go over the timeline of November 2nd. So Keith had work in the morning. Sherri brought the kids to daycare, and before 11 a.m. she had texted Keith wondering if he was coming to eat lunch at the house that day. Keith didn't get back to her for a few hours later, but just said, "No, sorry, I'm too busy." So Sherri decided to go ahead and take her run. Now, Sherri usually took the same path every time she ran, and Keith would know this path. So when Keith got home from work and realized that Sherri and the kids weren't home, it really freaked him out. That wasn't normal. Sherri would usually go get the kids around 4:30, and they would be home waiting for Keith to get home. So it really hadn't even occurred to Keith that Sherri hadn't picked up the kids. But he thought maybe if he called the daycare, they could tell him when she picked them up. That way he could tell maybe they went to the store or something like that. So he called the daycare and asked them what time Sherri picked up the kids, and they told him that the kids are still there. So he gets one of the grandmas to go pick up the kids so he can go and look for Sherri, because now he's worried. He got into the Find My iPhone app and looked for Sherri's location, saw it, and drove right to it. And it was near their mailbox on Sunset Drive in Old Oregon Trail. It was about a mile from their house, but it was on her path of her running. So he drove there, and Sherri wasn't there, but he did find her phone and earbuds and some of her hair wrapped up in it. He took photos of how this phone looked on the ground, because look at this. It looks staged. It doesn't look like someone who might have been startled and dropped it or anything. It's wrapped up. It's weird. So Keith calls 911 because he is freaking out by this point around 5:50 p.m.
911, what is your emergency? So I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual, and my kids should have been there by now from, daycare. So I was like, oh, maybe she went on a walk. I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit, the Find My iPhone app thing, and it said that it showed her phone, at our end of our driveway. We don't have really good service. Okay.
Not the end of our driveway, but the end of our street. So I just drove down there, and I saw her phone with her headphones because she started running again, and I found her phone, and it's got, hair ripped out of it, in the headphones. So I'm, totally freaking out, thinking, somebody, grabbed her.
Okay, what's your last name?
Yes, Papini, Papini.
And your first name?
Keith.
Keith?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go pick up your children?
No, I'm going to call my mom and have her do it.
Okay. What's your wife's name?
I'm going to, knock on every door. Sherri, Sherri.
And same last name?
Yes.
Is her vehicle there, or does she not have a vehicle?
She has a vehicle. It's at the house.
Okay, the vehicle is at the house?
She's running.
House? Okay.
Yes, I'm in it right now driving, and I took a picture of her phone on the ground before I picked it up.
Do you know what she was wearing? Is there
no
something
idea.
she always wears?
I'm assuming she went running, so
okay,
probably running athletic type clothes.
Okay, there's not an outfit she always wears or anything like that. Does she run with a dog or by herself?
By herself.
Okay. What time were the kids?
She just started running again, and we live in a...
When's the last time you heard from her?
She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home for lunch.
What time was that?
Give me 1 second. She sent me a text at 10:47 asking me if I was coming home from lunch from work. And I said, sorry, long day. And that was the last. Never spoke to her on the phone, never any other contact.
Okay, and what time are the kids supposed to be picked up?
Way before 5:30. She usually goes at 4:45.
Okay.
4:30, 4:45.
Okay, are you headed back to the house, or where are you at right now?
I'm at the end of the driveway. I'm at the Old Oregon Trail and Sunrise where they meet, because that's right where I found her phone on the ground. Telling me that something happened to her is the way I'm looking at it. There's then there was hair in the headphones. It got ripped off of the gravel.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I know you're trying to keep me calm, but obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to knock on everybody's door, but I will if I'm allowed to do that.
Well, let's just have the officers contact you so they can start, processing everything, figure out what's going on, okay? And I understand you're freaking out a little bit. We want to make sure we get your kids, make sure they're okay.
Do you want me to wait right here for somebody, or?
If you want to head back to your residence so they can contact you there, and in case she does return.
Okay.
Okay. We'll have them contact you at your residence. Call us back if anything changes, all right? They'll probably call you when they're on their way, and they're going to come out in person.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
So when the police get there, he shows them how they found the phone and the pictures of what it looked like. So then the law enforcement in Shasta County Sheriff's Department started their search for Sherri. Keith, in the next few days, then started reaching out to national news sites to please give more coverage to Sherri. He made public pleas on every media station that would let him, just begging them to please return Sherri. It was heartbreaking when he would just sob. Oh my God, I could barely handle that. So this case blew up on social media. There ended up being huge searches for Sherri. Keith was looking. Federal, local, and state law enforcements were looking. Tons of volunteers. And they focused just mostly around this neighborhood because it was huge. But I'm not kidding. Literally nothing was found. Nothing. And for weeks, people still put up posters of Sherri. They posted ribbons outside their house that symbolized Sherri. And the community just felt so bad for Keith. Can you even imagine? This dude was tore up. So there was a man who has always wanted to keep his identity private in this matter, so I'll respect that on the channel too. He was traveling to California, just visiting a friend, and he heard about this story. Now, this man is really wealthy, and he wanted to help, but it had to be anonymous. He did not want his name tied to it at all. That's not what it was about. It was about finding his wife. So Keith told the police about it, and the police just really blew it off and said it wasn't a good idea and did not want Keith to do it. But Keith did it anyway. Now, a woman named Lisa Jeter was friends with the Papinis, and she had a friend named Cameron Gamble. He was a former pilot in the Air Force. He's a captivity survival expert and works a lot in the fact of building situations and shipping containers that help mimic hostage situations to help victims break through their mental health and be able to move on in their life past this horrible type of situation that has occurred to them. And he travels all over the world in helping and negotiating kidnappings and hostage situations. And so he met Keith through Lisa. He said, well, I'll be the face of this reward that this man wants to offer us. So Keith, this anonymous man, and Cameron all get together, and the man offered a reverse ransom. Cameron made a YouTube video in which he explained to the public that there was a $50,000 reward for Sherri's safe return. She had to be completely unarmed, though. There would be no questions asked when returning her. But they gave a 100-hour deadline in hopes that it would speed them up bringing Sherri home. But nothing came up of this reverse ransom. Nobody answered it, and he did not see Sherri. So then the anonymous man decided to double his offer to $100,000. And on November 23rd, 2016, Cameron made a video and put it on YouTube with the $100,000 reward. Now, November 24th was Thanksgiving Day. A few days before Thanksgiving, poor Keith swears he got a call from Sherri. She was just screaming in the background and hung up. Now, Keith had planned a balloon release for Sherri to keep her name out into the public. But at 4 a.m. on November 24th, Thanksgiving Day, several 911 calls were flooding in. But one in particular we're going to talk about is a woman named Allison. She was driving with her daughter on the highway at this time, and the two had already been driving for 8 hours. And they just saw this woman on the side of the road, and she was just standing really close to traffic. It really made them scared. She was frantic and clearly going through something and just trying to flag someone down. And she knew something was wrong at this point because there was just dirt all over this girl. Now, since Allison was traveling, she didn't know where she was. She didn't know if it was a trap, kind of like those sex trafficking tricks that are going on now. So she went a little farther down the road, pulled over, and called 911. She made sure that there was a police officer heading there, but to be quite honest, she was really freaked out by this and asked if she could go ahead and go, and they said, absolutely, take care of you and your daughter first. Sherri was found along County Road 17, near Interstate 5 in Yolo County. She was about 150 miles from where she was kidnapped, and she still had chains around her waist, her wrists, and her ankles. Police let Keith know that she was there and they had found her, and he sped there as fast as he could. The police did warn him, though, she's in very rough shape, so just be cautious when you get here. And while she was waiting for Keith to get there, an ambulance did come to check on her. An EMT said Sherri was covered in bruises, covered in dry blood, and had been chained up. There were zip ties on her ankles, had hose clamps on her, and very underdressed for November. But Sherri was somewhat cooperative with the police. She claimed she didn't really remember anything at all, but other than telling them what happened to her, I guess she cooperated just fine. So then a police gave a recorder to Keith and said, try to talk to her about the situation and record it for us. That way we can start an investigation. She said, though, that her abductors told her that law enforcement was involved. So she was very wary of talking and cooperating fully with the police because, they told her that a police officer was going to buy her and she'd never be seen again. So she was very reluctant talking to the police. Now, she was taken to Woodland Hospital. She had to go under multiple tests, and all the injuries that they found was that she had a broken nose on the bridge. Her whole body was covered in bruises, but various bruising. So some were a week old, some were 2 days old, some were practically healed. There was variety. There was a deep gash on her neck, marks on her wrists where she had been bound, and Sherri had been branded on her shoulder. So police take DNA samples from Sherri and took her clothing for DNA sampling also. So then on November 28th, 4 days after she was found, Sherri applied for the California Victim Compensation Board for assistance. This organization gives you financial help to victims of violent crimes, and Sherri received $30,964. She did use it to pay her ambulance bill, her therapy sessions, and some home improvements. They also used the GoFundMe money that was set up by Keith to help her investigation on mental health and physical health bills also. Okay, so let's go over Sherri's story of what happened to her. I want to point out that to this day, Sherri has never spoken publicly about her side of this case. All of this is coming from police reports and what Keith has helped us put together. She was jogging a mile from her home, and someone threw a bag over her head and shoved her into an SUV. She was held hostage by 2 Hispanic women. She claimed that they kept their face and head covered the whole time, so she couldn't ever truly identify them. They mostly spoke in Spanish, and they did have guns on them.
Suspect number 1 was the younger of the 2 suspects. She had long, curly hair. She had a thick accent. She had pierced ears. She had thin eyebrows. Suspect number 2 was the older of the 2 suspects. She had straight black hair with some graying color. She had thick eyebrows.
But, like she said, they kept their face mostly covered, so she wasn't really sure if that's what they really looked like. She had said that she was chained into a closet. It was dark, cold, and dirty. And in her words, really annoying Mexican music was playing in the background always. She said the TV was on loud most of the time, and she's pretty sure she could smell burning, so she's almost positive there was a fireplace there. She said she slept a lot. That's really how she coped to what was happening to her. But because of that, it really messed up a timeline for her. She was treated absolutely terribly. Pretty much tortured. She was beaten multiple times, and one was from her broken nose and how all her hair was chopped off. And at some point in one of these violent encounters was when she was branded. She was starved. She said that they'd only give her maybe some rice, an apple, and a tortilla, but that's about it. And they put a bucket of kitty litter in the closet for her to use. Gross. Keith said she was physically abused. Bruises all over her face, just rashes on her body, ligature marks, burns, and again, her nose had been broken. All her hair was chopped off. She weighed 87 pounds when they found her. She was branded on her right shoulder, like I said earlier, and Sherri had said that she could barely walk when they threw her out of the car. Sherri had said she missed her kids so much. She would just roll up a blanket or a pillow in this closet and rock it back and forth pretending that it was her kids. That is heartbreaking. And so on November 24th, the day that she was released, she heard the 2 Hispanic women arguing. She heard a gunshot go off, and then one of those women just came and grabbed her and threw her in the car. They drove her all the way up to County Road 17 and just dropped her off. She did have a bag over her head she was trying to get off, and she was trying to get up so she could walk, but her legs just hurt so bad. And this is where we see security footage of, obviously, when she was able to get up, she ran to a church parking lot and then just bolting off somewhere else when she couldn't get in. And then this is supposedly around the time that Allison found her. So she would have been freed around 4:30 a.m. And then once the police found her, her family welcomed her back with open arms. Well, this story actually gets weirder. So let's get into the investigation. Now, the police believed Sherri right away. They were extremely worried about her, and even the mayor of Redding, Brent Weaver, said he did not doubt Sherri's version of events, and definitely stressed the importance of helping this victim and not trying to judge them and talk about it. But to be honest, the police didn't even know where to start. There were a lot of tips coming in, but it just led nowhere. Police released news of a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to the abductors. Now, some of the investigation that was going on while Sherri was missing, they had administered 12 search warrants in Michigan. The FBI even got involved in this one. And then Keith even started his own investigation that we kind of already talked about a little bit. But it is thought that everything that Keith was doing did hinder the case just a little bit. So the authorities knew they were looking for a dark SUV with 2 Hispanic women in California that were armed with handguns. Police looked at multiple possibilities. Sex offenders, administered 20 search warrants, checked people's phone records, bank accounts, their social media. They put a lot of time in this investigation. They even interviewed Allison Sutton, who swears that she had no reason to be lying about this. So she absolutely 100% believed and supported Sherri Papini. Now, of course, Keith was a suspect. He is the spouse of Sherri, and we all know that majority of the time, statistically, it is the significant other. And he knew that. He was completely cooperative. He did whatever the police needed him to do. He even volunteered himself for a polygraph test in which he passed. They did not rule Keith out yet just because they barely had leads, so where else were they even going to go? But they were keeping an open mind. But tons of people in the community claim there is just no way Keith had anything to do with this, including Sherri's family. He seemed desperate to find his wife. Like I said, it was heartbreaking. But 2 weeks after Sherri's return, Keith did write a check from the GoFundMe account for $31,808 into his own bank account, and then wrote a second check for $1,160 to Sherri's bank account. And on December 13th, 2016, Keith used $18,202 of that dollars to pay his credit card debt. And Sherri did the same thing for $13,053. And the rest of the money was just used for whatever they wanted to. So a lot of people started wondering, was this all to financially get ahead? So police and law enforcement all around the country really just can notice that there is just something not setting well with this case, right? I think even just us normal civilian type people know there's just something off. And Ken Ryan, a law enforcement expert and a criminology professor who has 25 years experience, publicly came out and said that he just doesn't believe Sherri. He was amazed by the coincidences and thinks the story is most likely false, but does believe that the police doesn't have the evidence to back that up. He said that he has never seen a case in his 25 years where someone is held captive and then just let go 20 days later. Reddit users also had found a post on a white supremacist page, and let's just say a lot of people think it was Sherri. It would be Sherri's maiden name, but it was a Sherri Grafe. It talked about fighting Latino people in high school and just contained a lot of racist remarks. And of course, it's not confirmed that it's Sherri. The family swears, of course, it's not. How many people do you know with the last name Grafe? But something that the police truly focused on too was there is just no way this girl branded herself, right? It's brutal. If you haven't went and watched my NXIVM video, they brand those girls and the research on it was horrific. And it was done on her right shoulder. So remember me mentioning those 12 search warrants in Michigan? Well, police find that Sherri has been texting this man from Detroit. Apparently, Sherri has known him for years, and they had just gotten back in touch before her disappearance. And they talked regularly until October 2016. And Sherri was really pushing to meet up with this person. And she was talking to him quite a bit before the kidnapping. Now, the 12 search warrants were for his property, and he was thoroughly investigated, but completely cleared. They couldn't find a thing on him. There is no way he was involved with this case. And almost a year later, Sherri cooperated enough for a sketch of these two individuals that abducted her. Police released the sketches and started searching down the path of maybe this was drug related. Meth was prominent in that area and really kind of started going down that path. Okay, so now we're going to be in 2017 during the investigation where two Hispanic women were arrested in Sacramento for sex trafficking. Maybe this was related, and so the police start looking into that. But in March, the Sacramento Bee published an article about Sherri and her past. And let's just say it shocked a lot of people. This is based in like 2000 when Sherri was a teen. There was a day that Sherri completely vandalized her father's house. And her sister had claimed that Sherri had also went to her house and tried to break in through the back door that day, but nothing ended up being stolen or damaged. And in 2003, her father had filed an unauthorized bank withdrawal to the police that ended up being Sherri. She was only 21 at this time though. 21-year-olds make dumb decisions, and she did end up paying her dad completely back. But in October 2017, the results of the DNA on Sherri's underwear came back. The FBI ran the samples in CODIS and found no matches. But it was announced that there wasn't just one person's DNA in her underwear. There were two. There was one woman's, Sherri's, but there was male DNA. But she was captured by two Hispanic women. And this DNA was tested against Keith, and it wasn't a match. So we're going to fast forward to 2020. On June 9th, the FBI special agents started searching the trash of one of Sherri's ex-boyfriends. They found an Honest Honey green tea bottle that they could get the DNA of this guy off of. And the DNA on July 10th, 2020 was deemed Jason Reyes. On August 10th, they brought him in for questioning, and he said that he initially met Sherri at a Friday night live youth program. And so they contacted this youth program, and they were able to find out that Sherri was actually very problematic in this youth program. She would lie to these people all the time and would extremely exaggerate stories. They dated back in 2006, but he said that Sherri was just a very attention-hungry person. And again, said she would constantly make up stories. He had told the police that they had solely contacted through prepaid phones. So the police went and found the phones. Lo and behold, they were texting the morning of Sherri's disappearance. So they did cell site analysis on these two phones. Lo and behold, it tracked James all the way to Redding, California, in which the phones matched together and left. And if you looked at James's work schedule, he called off the 1st and the 2nd of November in 2016. He said that Sherri told him that Keith beat and sexually assaulted her regularly, and so therefore he thought he was helping her run away. And he confirmed that Sherri stayed with him in Costa Mesa for 3 weeks. He picked her up, and when they got to the house, Sherri made him board up the windows. She did not want to receive any type of sunlight in case she decided to go home. She starved herself. She would not go out of her way to get food. She would only eat if James offered her food. If he got groceries, she would cook, but she would only eat about half of whatever she was given. And this is how she ended up dropping down to 87 pounds. And she would ask him to hit her, and he said no, he's not going to hit her, but he would hold a hockey stick still while she threw herself in it. He also admitted to being the one that branded her shoulder. And before Thanksgiving that year, she had pretty much decided that she was going home and that it was time to start staging her kidnapping. She just, missed her kids a lot. So James had contacted one of his friends to rent a car for them, and they used that car to drive Sherri to Northern California. So the police went and looked at this car rental paperwork, and it did match perfectly, and so did the mileage on the car. So they did ask him why he didn't go to the police, and he just kind of said, well, I always thought if they came to me, I would talk to them, but there was no reason to go out of my way. So then the police went and saw James's house, and by God, there's a room in James's house that matches the description of Sherri saying the room she was held hostage in looked like. Are you kidding me? So in August 2020, FBI agents and Shasta County Police sat down with Keith and Sherri. They definitely started by saying that it is illegal to lie to law enforcement, trying to give a hint, and they pretty much told them everything James said. So they asked her about her abductors again, and she stood with the 2 Hispanic women's story. So then they show her pictures of James' apartment, and she says, well, they do look similar, but they're just not exactly the same. But Sherri did mention in this interview that she actually doesn't want the abductors caught because they let her go, and she wouldn't be alive today if they hadn't have let her go. So the investigator said, well, they're never going to be found because you made them up. And they gave her all the evidence, including the paperwork that showed the DNA matched James Reyes, and she was still denying everything. So they just asked Keith to leave for a second and let us talk to Sherri, and Sherri started to admit more and more and more and more and more. She had talked to James and other men. When she would go out of town, it was kind of her kink to talk to men in those towns and hook up with them, and it was just a horrible mistake though. And by the end of of this interview, they had enough evidence to press charges on Sherri. And the police believe that Sherri ripped her own hair out and wrapped them around her headphones and phone to heighten the situation. And they had found a private Pinterest board on her phone that she had labeled gift ideas, but the only thing in them were the wood burner type tools that James said he branded her with. And so on March 3rd, 2022, 6 years after Sherri was reported missing, police followed Sherri to her kids' piano lesson. When she had gotten there, they let her drop her kids off and then had went in and said something had happened to her car and needed her to step outside. They didn't want to arrest her in front of her kids, so that's why they were trying to pull her away, but she caught on and started freaking out. She was screaming and yelling no, and she even threw her phone 20 feet. She was accused of making false statements to a federal law enforcement officer, mail fraud, for receiving all that money from the California Victim Compensation Board, and she had up to $500,000 in fines. And she was facing up to 25 years in prison. Law enforcement believes she was lying about her kidnapping. They stood their ground that she stayed at her ex-boyfriend's that whole time, and she had harmed herself for her own story she was trying to spin. Keith did end up separating from Sherri. I cannot imagine what that man is going through. He said him and his kids are completely traumatized from what Sherri did to them. So on March 9th, 2022, Papini was able to make her $120,000 bail, in which Keith and her parents paid. But she had specific agreements that she had to meet before they could place her bond. She had to surrender her passport because she was a flight risk. She had to agree to remain in one part of the state. She had to give up any type of weapons that she owned. She had to agree to not use alcohol or drugs at all during this time, and I'm sure she was drug tested. And she had to go under psychiatric evaluations. So she ended up staying with a relative around 75 miles away. And in April this year, 2022, Keith filed for divorce sometime in this month. He also ended up getting full custody of the kids, which anybody that's ever went through a custody battle, you know it's nearly impossible for the mom to lose complete custody of your kids. He claimed that she has not been acting in a rational manner though, and hell yeah, got full custody. And he did ask the court to please help him protect his kids by giving him full custody. And Sherri hasn't seen her kids since April 4th, where she missed a scheduled visitation. Unbelievable. And on the 18th of April, she decided to take a plea deal. This was for 1 count of false statements and 1 count of mail fraud, in which she admits that yes, she caused this whole hoax. Now, she attended virtually because we are in COVID times at this point. They asked her about her mental illness and exactly what was going on, and she was getting treated for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. She did show a lot of remorse. She explained that she was deeply ashamed of herself and all the pain she caused people. And her sentencing was actually just a few days ago from when I'm filming this, which is September 17th. And this girl was only sentenced to 8 months for all of this. But that is all I have for Sherri Papini. Is this girl not wild? I couldn't believe it when I saw this case. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Please like and subscribe for me and hit that notification button. That way you are notified the next time I upload. Please don't forget that we do have a GoFundMe for Crystal Young still going to help her mom afford the PI that has came to her asking to look into her daughter's case. If you don't know who Crystal Young is, please go back on my channel and watch that video because it's wild. And then I also still have stickers for sale on my website that will also be in the description box below, and all proceeds go to the Cold Case Foundation. So go down there, get some stickers, that way I can send that donation in. Like I said, all proceeds go to the Cold Case Foundation, so it is for a good cause. Alright, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!